Happy holidays, everyone. Hope everyone had a great holiday. I told everyone I was going to do a BRAP rant at some point as I'm off this entire work week for the holiday. But welcome everyone back to BRAP. Look, I was inspired, if you will, to do a BRAP rant today because with me today we have especially Lee Hampton, but Hamp actually blogs. For those who don't know, he blogs. I forgot is it Rounding Off Infinity? Did I get that correct, Hamp?
Yeah, that's correct.
All right, so it's a great blog that Hamp. By the way, Hamp, I'm not sure how frequently you blog, but I know that you've been blogging more, and I gotta say, I love the blogging, man. I mean, it's it's better than some of the stuff that I read from gaming media. It's definitely nice to have some like I don't know how to describe it. I guess like everything today seems like a news story in gaming media. It's just media in general, I think. But it's like Phil Spencer dropped the water in his office, and that's like a story. It's nice to have a nice change of pace, something a little more well thought out.
Yeah, that's what I used to say during. That's what I used to say during the what was it? I want to say it was Halo. It must have been Halo 3. I used to say like the like with the developer diaries and all that stuff. I used to be like, yeah, I know what the Bungie team is having for lunch today, literally. Like that's how the media was acting about like every scrap morsel of information that came out.
Yeah, no, absolutely, and it's just like I said, it's a nice change of pace. But look, I want to give a big shout out to everyone here in the live chat. Thank you, everyone. I know this is kind of a very impromptu, so really appreciate everyone stopping by here. See some usuals here. Thank you again, and please do me a favor, hit that like button. If you're new, hit the bell notification, subscribe. If you're looking for, as I like to say, a little more well-nuanced conversation, well-thought-out conversation about all things video games and entertainment, you've come to the right place. We're not a console-centric podcast. We don't pom-pom. We just give you the facts, right, Hamp? No, we try to really have a good conversation here, and we don't do anything that we're not here to stoke the console wars or use a lot of hyperbole to describe people at the FTC or people in charge of Xbox or PlayStation. We just don't do that here. So if you're looking for something minus all that nonsense, then you've come to the right place. But anyhow.
Yeah, and that's it. And Brad gave you the good side of the coin. Let me also say, if you're coming here because you're Linus looking for your security blanket, we're also not here to make you feel good. We're not here to pat you on the back and be your frat boys and let you step up to the keg and take a drink. This is where we come.
No keg stands.
That's right. This is where we come to talk about stuff in the way. I mean, for instance, one of the things we're going to get around to in this discussion of yet again the merger is how the rubric is about whether or not the merger is illegal, not whether or not the merger makes Xbox consumers feel good. And so it's great to cite that as a knock-on effect of the merger. But as Lena Khan herself has stated very recently, as I've been emphasizing, the first rubric to be passed is whether or not the merger is legal within the laws and regulations of our country. And then it's next to determine whether or not there are any negative impacts to consumers. There could be lots of great impacts that could come out of this, right? Like lambs could be clonable and gain wings, right? But if the merger is illegal, then the merger is illegal, right? Regardless. So that's part of what often gets lost in the discussion that happens around that's primarily stoked from fan brand alignment.
Yeah, that's a great point, Hamp. We're definitely not here to pat you in the back and let you know that your favorite console is the dominant console and and that the other console's bad or evil or not honest. Like we just don't do that here. Frankly, that is that's just low-hanging fruit, and I don't think that brings any value to the table. That's why we don't have those kind of conversations here. But anyhow, Ryan, Ryan says, wait, so you're not going to tell me that one corporation is scared to the other corporation? No, we're not going to do that. This isn't WWE, right? Like we're not expecting Phil Spencer and Jim Ryan to battle out in Hell in the Cell. It's just not going to happen.
That's right. This isn't the Undertaker in the front of the ambulance coming into the back to take out Stone Cold Steve Austin, Triple H, and Vince.
Oh my goodness, that's too funny, man. Those are that was wrestling in its prime, in my opinion. I appreciate what WWE's trying to do now, but it's just not the same, man. It doesn't resonate with me as much as it used to, and I feel like that the Attitude Era was the best. But anyhow. Yeah, so Hamp, so you wrote a great article, a great blog, by the way, and I did share it with, I did actually retweet it on Twitter, and some compliments there, Hamp. I don't know if you read some of the compliments, but well deserved. I mean, I thought it was a very thoughtful piece. I was talking to Everborn Saga DM. I said, Hamp's probably one of the only people I've seen actually articulate both sides of the coin here. With and you mentioned this on the podcast, and I said you should actually be working for Microsoft instead of Brad Smith, who is insinuate that they're going to war with the federal government. But you actually on this show, and then in the article that you wrote, the blog that you wrote, you actually gave a great case for Microsoft as to what they should be saying to the FTC, which was I forget what it was, something to the effect of, hey, like not having Xbox as a viable platform is actually not good for the industry. I hope I summed that up correctly.
Yeah, so if you want to kind of go into that first, the article today, the post today, was about how I don't buy the argument that this is good for consumers, right? Because I walk back through the history, and I think there's an argument that could be made that says it's been a very long time since Microsoft and Xbox were good for consumers at all, regardless of the Activision acquisition. But that stems from the first argument that I posed, which was actually trying to throw another perspective out there of a way that Microsoft could argue in their defense, and so it was a pro Microsoft, pro Xbox article, if you were, and that I posted on Twitter. I didn't post that on my blog because I hadn't turned the corner to focusing on blogging more, which I have now. But basically that first argument was that if it weren't for Microsoft, there would only be two competitors in the gaming space, right? Sega departed the platform space 21 years ago, right, by folding up the Dreamcast. All of the companies that had tried to be that third player in the market had failed, right? So 3DO, CDI, Neo Geo, TurboGrafx, Atari was the big player before that. They had folded. By 2002, 2001, 2002, when the original Xbox was launching, first of all, we were on the brink of a very bad outlook for the industry, right? With there only being two major platform holders. But at that time, there were major barriers to entry. There were high costs. There were domain expertise. There was, limited and constrained talent that was available. Basically, back then, and I would contend today, it was and will be impossible for new platform owner competitors to enter the console market space, given the positions of Nintendo and Sony. And so only a company that is of the financial size and strength of Microsoft can step over those barriers and become a competitor. And so part of what I wrote in the article today was that, if depending on how this thing goes, right, if this thing goes through, one of the things that has to be looked at is it possible for any platform contender to step into the space if they're not one of the big tech five, or some major entertainment conglomerate like an NBC Universal or a Warner Brothers Discovery, and that's not good, right, for consumers, right? It's been 20 something years since we've seen a new platform contender, when we had come through the time in the 80s and 90s where at least people had tried. But for the last 21 years, no one's really tried, right? Maybe you can make an argument that Stadia was an attempt to do that. You can make an argument that maybe some of the cloud platforms are trying to create kind of this alternative gaming market. Although you can say that, but lots of Xbox console warriors will not allow you to say that there's a high tier gaming market. That's just something that's created and made out of the ether. But maybe that's another topic. But I mean, my feeling is, and the other thing that I brought up in this original argument was, if this deal doesn't get approved, right, which you have to look at quantifiably, is that Xbox over the last 21 years has tried to compete in the gaming market. They have also, however, been incentivized not to go, maybe what I would say, not to go hamp, as I sometimes say. They've held back, right, because the settlement of 2001 has discouraged them from using some of the more heavier-handed tactics that they were known for before. Quite frankly, it is why we have Google. It is why we have Facebook. If that settlement hadn't occurred, if they hadn't been given an antitrust lawsuit back in 1999, it is very, very, very likely that Microsoft would have bought Facebook, would have bought Google, and incorporated that technology into Microsoft. They laid back off of that. And so they went into the gaming market instead, right? But that gaming market provides 4% of their total revenue. So if this deal doesn't go through after 21 years of trying, but feeling handcuffed, maybe arguably, there's a very strong argument as to why they would bother continue doing this for 4% revenue. Lots of arguments out there, including from, our own Falky, who, has said, that money could be put to better use. Investors have...
Yeah, I was going to say, go ahead, say that point. I was just about to say what you were about to say, but go ahead, man.
Yeah, investors have been asking that question, right? Why are we doing this? And so, that argument that I had built for Microsoft was, hey, go to the FTC, say that we're good for gaming because we're the third competitor. We're the competitor that's keeping Nintendo and Sony in check. Yeah, we're third, but we're still good for gaming, good for consumers. And then say, look, if we don't acquire Activision, which allows us to catch up, right, after, holding back from utilizing our financial strength, then we don't know that there's a point for us to do this. We might exit the market. And if we do that, that leaves the market with two competitors. And how can you argue that that's good for consumers? So that was the first.
Real quick, yeah. and if they did, and look, I don't want Xbox to leave the console space, because if they did leave, it would really leave Sony as the true quote unquote like traditional console platform out there. I know Nintendo, yes, it's gaming hardware, but I've always argued that's kind of a hybrid between mobile and, if we think about like high end, console hardware, like Nintendo's not playing in that same space that Microsoft and Sony are playing in right now. So I wouldn't want them to leave because I wouldn't want Sony to only be the player in that high end space, if you will. But let me get this super chat real quick from Bobby Jackson. Bobby Jackson, the $5 super chat, says, that's commendable, Hamp. I think any conversation should talk about why it could be good for gamers and the industry, as well as why it could be bad. And that's the thing, Bobby. Like I'm only seeing the conversation I typically see is one or the other. How it's either bad for gaming or it's just good for gaming. But no one's talking about both sides of the coin here. And that's what we're going to talk about here a little bit today. I'm sorry, Hamp. Go ahead, man.
Nope. It was, your comment about Nintendo and why Nintendo's doing what it does today is part of the conversation about what I wrote. And so we should definitely get into that as we talk about today's actual post. But I definitely wanted to set the stage for, because I'm sure some people will come across the table and say that, I'm pro PlayStation and I'm defending Jim Ryan and yada, yada, yada. So I just wanted to make sure that I set the record that the first time I got off the bench, it was in Microsoft's defense, if you want to look at things that way.
Yeah. And that was a very well thought out like case for Microsoft. And I even said to you, I'm like, you know what? You should actually they should hire you to make that case. And I don't disagree. I mean, again, it goes back to, I don't necessarily think, I don't want Sony to be the only, console manufacturer that's making high end consoles. Like I don't want that. We lived through that a little bit, Hamp, when it was, I know Sega was around, but Nintendo, and I didn't know this, Hamp, but Nintendo was actually fined by the FTC in the early 90s for price fixing. Did you know that?
No, I don't think I recall that.
Yeah, I watched a video. Warrior Word actually put out a video, and it talked about Nintendo and how their dominance of the market, and they were able to, set prices at a certain level, and they use their their popularity in the market to kind of muscle retailers to not sell other like Toys R Us. I think like I forget they actually gave like the revenue numbers that Nintendo products being sold at Toys R Us were doing for that company, and they were I forget how much it was, but it was something significant where Nintendo was basically kind of allowed to threaten retailers to, hey, you know what, if you're going to sell games that are cheaper than our content, or if you're going to I think part of it was market other alternatives, and we're going to pull our stuff from your stores or something. I think that was the gist of it. And the FTC fined them, investigated them, and fined them for price fixing here in the U.S. So I wasn't aware of that until I saw this video yesterday. So I'll have to share that video with you, Hamp. But it's a video that came out like in the mid '90s, I think it was. So
yeah, very cool. No, go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead, man.
No, I was going to mention, so Innate is in the chat, one of my favorite things, because we're doing a rant with just the two of us, which means I do have to do due diligence and pay attention to chat. Innate says, now I missed it because it scrolled, Microsoft not running away because they didn't get Activision. That is the biggest stretch I've ever heard. Come on, man. They currently have over 30 studios that they don't need Activision in the slightest. So Innate, how do I want to say this? So it's going to be very important for you to listen in order to keep up with the conversation today. So I didn't say running away. What I said was that I'm spending lots of money in a market for only 4% revenue. It is not the most profitable part of my business. Why would I continue investing that money? And my shareholders and investors are asking the same question. That is what I said. I didn't say anything about running away. We laughed at the joke that Ryan mentioned earlier, which is a lot of people have run around talking about people being scared, and I have cast aspersions on that notion multiple times on this podcast. C-level executives who get paid six-figure salaries several times over are not scared. They make business decisions, they talk through them, they weigh the risks, they quantify the risks, and they make decisions. So again, we're not in here for speculation and propaganda. We're not talking about running away or people being scared. And they do not have over 30 studios. They actually have like 23 or 24, just to make sure that we're clear on that.
Yeah, and that's kind of Hamp. There was actually that you shared that article with me, that Seeking Alpha article, where there's actually investors like I'm not advising, or I'm telling people to put a hold on buying Microsoft stock. Is that?
Yeah. So he's an investor. He's a columnist on Seeking Alpha, which is an investment portal, investment analytics service. And what he described in there was how, since working at Seeking Alpha as an investment analyst, he has made a recommendation to purchase Microsoft stock, I think 86 times. And he said, this is my 87th time, and I'm recommending Microsoft as a not buy. And everything in there is super pertinent to people who aren't investors or really tracking this stuff at a hyper detailed level. But I will say the two things that leaped out at me, which I wasn't even aware of, was he mentioned, and he kind of inferred it. He didn't. I'm adding this kind of Jerry Springer characteristic on myself, but he talked about the NVIDIA ARM deal and how kind of it's just desserts. That Microsoft was one of the people, lots of people have gone to cheerleading and pom-pomming, like every single little submission of the RFI questionnaire that the CMA released, or sometimes the EC, of companies around the industry that have submitted comment on whether or not this merger is good or bad for the industry, or good or bad for business. And so, Microsoft had to do this for the NVIDIA ARM deal and actually spoke out against the NVIDIA ARM deal, much in the same way that Sony and Jim Ryan have spoken out against the Microsoft Activision merger. And so he just kind of mentioned, just desserts that Microsoft spoke out against that, but now is, trying to acquire Activision. But then the other thing he mentioned that I had read and that I had seen, but I'd forgotten, is that, Microsoft recently talked about, I don't know if they've submitted it yet or if they're still authoring it, but has been working on a patent for serving ads in online games and cloud streaming games, and obviously failing to acquire Activision, as well as Overwatch, as well as World of Warcraft, as well as whatever the Diablo mobile thing is, right? All of these plays that accent their cloud delivery, their online delivery, their game streaming delivery, that would not be folded into that advertising stream, obviously would be negative knocks against their future strategies and plans.
Yeah, and Frog, you're right. Yes, we understand the NVIDIA ARM deal is very different than Microsoft Activision, but the point was that Microsoft spoke out against the NVIDIA ARM deal. That's the point. So, but no, Hamp. I mean, I've read that investors are kind of, and I think even that Seeking Alpha article, if I'm not mistaken, I think he may have made reference to, hey, instead of spending $70 billion on Activision, why not actually invest that money into some of your, into areas like Azure, into building, I think he said, like green data centers, things that in areas that would probably have more return on the business where they're actually having success. And I think that goes back to what you're saying, Hamp, like 4% of, you're spending all this money just to get, what was it again, 4% of the revenue?
Yeah, 4% of their total revenue.
Yeah, at some point you're going to look at that ROI and be like, does it make sense for us to stick around? Especially if you think about this, especially if you're dropping $70 billion to acquire something. I would imagine that the investors might look at that and be like, okay, that better yield more than 4%. If we're putting that much money into gaming.
And Jacob Tapua says, didn't NVIDIA just Jacob, NVIDIA did not just close their streaming service. I think what they did was they pulled the game stream capability off the NVIDIA Shield, but GeForce Now is still very much a going concern and very much an available service that consumers could subscribe to.
Yeah, they pulled it off the Shield, the game thing that you just mentioned. I forgot now what it's called, but yeah. All right, so where were we, Hamp? I just lost my train of thought now. As I'm trying to keep up with the chat here. What? All right, so we're talking about the flip side of the coin here. So we talked about like how, obviously I think you and I would agree, and I think many in the chat I think would agree that competition is good. And as I said earlier, I don't want to see Microsoft exit the space. I don't think if this deal goes through that they would. I mean, I think they could still take that $60 or $9 billion or whatever it is and maybe invest it in maybe some smaller studios, maybe invest it internally and bring in people in. I mean, I don't think I've seen people mention that this will spark competition. This will make them competitive. It will make Microsoft competitive in the console space if they acquire. And my only question to that is, like, why does this them being competitive solely rest on this acquisition? I think what it does is it's a shot of adrenaline to the arm for Game Pass. And again, that just goes back to, and I posed this question yesterday. I said, I'm wondering how this deal benefits the consumers in general. And I'm still wondering, for the people outside of Game Pass, Hamp, I don't see how it benefits them. For me, I play Call of Duty, and if they deliver Modern Warfare, and I Modern Warfare would be the Call of Duty iterations that I would prefer playing. If they're delivering those, and they seem they're delivering them every other year, then that would be a great addition to Game Pass, because I do subscribe to Game Pass. That would be a great benefit to me, because then there's a game that I'm not having to fork over $70 to play, and then I can play. I can own it on multiple platforms and have them pay additional money. So, but outside of that, I mean, I don't know who this really benefits. I know Microsoft has said, hey, this benefits consumers, it benefits the industry, and I think, Hamp, you did a really good job of articulating, like, hey, that piece that maybe it doesn't necessarily benefit consumers the way people think it is. I mean, that's kind of the the thing that's always brought up by people that are, for whatever reason, really, really kind of involved in pom-pomming this deal to go through, If you saw the tweets responding to Lena Khan from some diehard Xbox fans, some individuals that I know that are part of Xbox centric podcast. First of all, Ham, there's some really, really just wild takes, man. In response to Lena Khan's tweet the other day about where she actually linked her opinion piece on the Wall Street Journal, where she says corporations sometimes try to convince the FTC to back off blocking an illegal deal by making ESG. I forget what ESG stands for. It's is it environmental?
It's I think it's like environmental, social, and governance. And so what I would think of it is it's knock-on effects, right? It's, hey, if you let us do this, then good things will come to consumers. And it's, I'm very happy to hear, and I mean, and quite frankly, she hasn't gotten off the bench, right, in terms of putting a public opinion out there to state why this is going down and what their point of it is. So I was glad to see her finally do it. And the point of it is just the same thing that I've been saying and the thing that I wrote about today, which is all of those are knock-on effects. The first rubric is it legal within the laws of the country and within the regulatory framework that allows companies to do business, right? And what she's saying is that's the first thing it has to pass. And by the point of her filing a lawsuit, obviously she doesn't feel that it does. So again, all of these things, like, it's going to be good, right? And this goes to the, promises are made by companies, and those promises, may or may not be fulfilled, right? So you go back to all the mergers, right? AT&T trying to buy Sprint, and, was it Dish? I can't remember what happened with Dish trying to buy T-Mobile, and yada, yada. All of them said, right, this is good for consumers. People will have lower prices. If we don't understand that that's corporate propaganda and that that's companies saying what they need to say to try and get deals done, then I don't understand. I just don't understand why people are anchoring themselves to that. I think, no crap, I'm going to propose that I'm going to make a $70 billion purchase of one of the other top 10 competitors in the industry that earns 65% of the revenue from the gaming space. And what I'm not going to claim that it's good for consumers. I'm not going to claim that it's going to bring prices down. That's kind of ludicrous to just buy into that hook, line, and sinker, and full barrel without questioning it.
Yeah, that's a great point, Hamp. And she gave a couple bullet points. I think she mentioned antitrust laws do not let us turn a blind eye to illegal mergers just because firms promise some unrelated social benefit. Our role is to serve as law enforcers who block unlawful activity, not as deal makers who accept reduced competition in exchange for some unrelated benefit. So I think that goes back to her stance. When I read that, to me, it goes back to kind of what she said. Like, it's not the FTC's job to figure out how to make these deals work within the frameworks of law. The companies need to figure this out. Like, we're not here to, like, and I'm paraphrasing, but she was essentially saying, we're not mediators here. We're not here to, like, fix this for you or help you figure it out. Like, that needs to happen before you come to the table.
Yeah, and again, it's arguably anecdotal, and maybe you could argue that it's because I read, like, that again. I've built governance frameworks at multiple government agencies, and that has been my exact stance. Like, when I'm doing a governance board for project management, for financial adjudication, yada yada yada, what I've said is the board is not the place where I'm arbitrating your solution. Right, your solution, and reaching across the aisle and talking to all the other parts of the agency, right, to validate whether or not this impacts them and getting their buy-in. All that needs to be done before you guys come in here, right? That's not my job, right, to sit up here as the chairman, as the chair of whatever given board. So, so I get it. Yeah.
Yeah. So Froggy White, maybe you were late to the beginning of the show. But you say it would be easier to take you guys more seriously if you were not constantly cheerleading for Sony. There are benefits to consumers if they are made to sign agreements to hold them to it. Froggy, I perhaps you missed the part where we said that we think that Xbox leaving the console space isn't probably good to have. Well, at least I said that. I was pretty clear that, hey, don't want Xbox to leave the console space. I don't want Sony being the only manufacturer of console hardware that's putting out like higher end consoles. Because I don't think Nintendo's playing in that same space. I just said that earlier in the show. If you'd like to give us examples of how we're cheerleading for Sony, that would be great. And if you want to articulate the benefits to consumers, if they're made to sign agreements to hold them to it, let us know. I mean, like flesh out what those benefits are to consumers. Be happy to talk about it. What we're asking in the question that I'm proposing, when I say, "Hey, Ice Cream Gaming," when I say things like, benefits to consumers, I'm asking how. And the only benefit that I'm seeing, and if somebody is, again, this I'm trying to encourage dialogue here, a discussion over how this is beneficial to consumers, because I'm not seeing it. Maybe you're seeing something else that I'm not seeing, but that's the point of having and driving conversation, because the only benefit that I'm seeing right now for this deal is that it benefits those people that play Call of Duty that are in Game Pass, or play Call of Duty and may be incentivized to go into Game Pass now. But I don't see how this, and I know everyone talks about, the COD's coming to Nintendo. Yes, it is. And I think that's great. I think it's nice that Microsoft ironed out a 10-year deal, assuming this deal goes through with Nintendo. But what I don't know is what version of Call of Duty the Nintendo version is going to get. It may not be on equal footing compared to the the PlayStation and Xbox versions, and I say that only because, again, speculation on my part, but I'm just basing that thought on the hardware of the Nintendo Switch. So yeah, I mean, no one's cheerleading here. You may have missed the beginning of the show, but the point overall, though, is just to encourage a discussion about this, because they really are two sides, and we just presented those two sides. Hamp laid out his case as why this deal going through is good for the console space. It's good to have Xbox or Microsoft competing in the console space, given that we've had people come in and out, and they just haven't been able to be successful. Microsoft's really the only one the last 20 years. I mean, Hamp said it, like, we haven't had a new competitor. And I think you gave the example of maybe Stadia as one example. But even then, like, Stadia was backed by Google, which is one of the big five. And so we haven't seen many entries. I know would Atari VCS count, Hamp? Because
it would not, particularly considering that they just folded Chop up on that as well.
Okay. All right.
And let me just address the easy reach argument that people go for. People talk about and Froggy, I get, and I think I understand maybe your frustration, I guess. I won't say what I was going to say. I understand your frustration. You feel that you're going to podcast after podcast, putting Microsoft on the Microsoft while giving Sony a pass on most things. I can't take accountability for what other podcasts do. And my point is, on this show, I have never said this deal shouldn't go through. I've said what this deal requires is an extreme level of due diligence, an extreme level of granularity in digging through it. And I've said that it is the best thing in the world, in my opinion, that it is going to a court to be decided by a judge, because then whatever decision gets made will have the force of law. And then people can cry and be salty about it all that they want to, but, I won't care. I mean, I don't care now, but, it's I understand your perspective and point of view, but, I don't know that we take accountability on this podcast for what other people do. The easy reach argument that people make for this merger being good for consumers is that it will make COD available in more places, and that it will make it cheap. And so one of the cautionary things that I throw out is, and what I wrote about today is making things cheap for consumers is a short-term view. What the regulatory agency has to do, and what the judicial system will do, is they will look at what are the farther reaching impacts of the deal. And so, one of the other things people like to throw around is, the FTC needs to be looking out for consumers, not competitors. And again, that, and so Darkseid is saying, what judge knows better in gaming other than the rest of the community? Again, I will say, for asserting my own position, I am more confident in somebody who knows the law making a decision than people who play games thinking that they are experts on making decisions about the gaming industry as a competitive matter and as a business matter and as a financial matter. People who play games and are familiar with, Game Informer and GameSpot and IGN don't qualify people as legal experts for regulating antitrust and anti-competition in this country. That's just my own personal opinion. So, like I said, the regulatory agencies and the judge need to look at what the further reaching impacts are than just making COD cheaper right next year or the year after. As BRAP talked about, I mentioned, there hasn't been another platform competitor entering the space in 21 years because no one's going to. When you have a behemoth like Microsoft right in the market that can throw its money around, and then you have entrenched and established competitors like Sony and Nintendo. We talk a little bit about why does Nintendo do what it does, right? Why did it veer off course after the GameCube, right? And go the route of low-end hardware, not highly performant hardware, and double down on focusing on its IP rather than trying to go toe-to-toe with Sony and Microsoft, which it is documented as being actually quoted as part of their strategy. And again, it's because, if you look at the way we won the Cold War, right? Part of the formula of how we won the Cold War was we outspent the Soviet Union, right? We forced them into a financial race that they didn't have the capital base to keep up with. And so Microsoft has that effect and impact on the market. It creates a barrier to entry of cost competition that it can maintain because it can engage in loss leader strategies and tactics that other people can't. Other companies and competitors can't do what Microsoft does. They can't go a year without releasing first party exclusives. Nintendo decided that it couldn't go the route of making the big investments that needed to make in tier one kind of level performant hardware, and so it took a different path. One of the things that again the regulatory agencies and the judge will have to look at is, if Microsoft acquires Activision, which by the way, again, part of this argument is, that somehow, without anybody being able to articulate how, it creates more competitors. First off, it doesn't. It is a simple mathematical, quantifiable fact that the immediate impact is that it reduces the total number of competitors in the market. A market where only 10 companies make 65% of the revenue in the gaming industry, right? And Microsoft is going to acquire another one of those top 10. Right. And so it doesn't actually increase choices for people, although that's the argument simply based solely on COD. It actually reduces choices for consumers because it reduces the number of suppliers that you are able to procure products from. Right. Again, that is the rubric. Right. And that's the rubric that the regulatory agency and the judge have to look at.
And that's the part that people, I think, are missing. The one piece that's not connecting with people. I mean, and I think a lot of people that where I see a lot of people saying, "Oh, it's good for consumers, it's good for the industry, it creates more competition." Those are the people that look. I mean, from what I'm reading, and again, I'm just using social media. They're the Xbox centric podcast. They're the Xbox fanatics, as I like to call them, because some of the responses to Lena Khan I thought were interesting to say the least. A lot of them weren't really well thought out. A lot of them brought up, that she should look at Sony and the acquisition of Crunchyroll, and their deals with Spider-Man deals with the video games. Like those things just don't carry the same weight that this acquisition does. And Sony is not. Look, Sony isn't a big five tech company. They don't have the dominance in enterprise that Microsoft does. They don't have what I think is Azure number 2 now in cloud. Is that right behind AWS? Is that correct, Amp?
Yeah, they are number 2. Not, I wouldn't say right behind. The division of that market is basically AWS has 33%. Azure has 22 and Google has 11, and then fourth in line I'm pretty sure is Tencent.
Yeah, but so those are why, and I see people say perhaps defending Sony. No, it's not a defense of Sony. It's just it's just it's the facts, the reality of the matter that Microsoft's just in a different position to leverage its own adjacencies in ways that Sony and Nintendo can't even do. That's part of why this is being scrutinized the way it is. And so that's the thing. I don't understand, like, when we point these things out, why people think it's a defense of Sony. I mean,
I don't know. I've sat right here on the show and said on Twitter, right, one of my problems with this line of argument from certain pockets of resistance is you should be able to discuss this topic, right, and come up with an argument, quite frankly, without mentioning Sony, because Sony is a singular competitor. The things I've pointed out are, what is the impact to EA? What is the impact to Ubisoft? What is the impact to 1047 games? Right? Those are questions that people who are aligning in the Microsoft camp, I would contend, don't want to answer, never address, and never respond to. And so one of the scenarios, right, that I talked about this morning is, if this acquisition goes through, Activision will have a different set of performance incentives that may not be beneficial to consumers, right? You look at Call of Duty Vanguard last year, right? Activision came off of that and put a lot of pressure on Infinity Ward. And you even go back the year before that and you look at what was going on with Sledgehammer and Raven. And the fact that Activision stepped in and grabbed Treyarch and said, hey, you need to take over. You need to go out of sequence, right? And pull off another Black Ops 2 years in a row. Right, you need to pull this thing out of the dirt, right? They had to do that because Activision is not as well capitalized as Microsoft. Obviously, Activision is not in the position to weather multiple years in a row of a bad Call of Duty, right? They will be under Microsoft, right? They're not going to have the incentive to do a make good when Call of Duty is not well received. COD will be in more places. It will be available for people at reduced cost. Their cloud spend, right? Their infrastructure that COD is built on, that cost will no longer be a factor for them. That will be supported by Microsoft. The pressure will be less. And so with a wider spread market share and cheaper consumption models compared to Battlefield, for instance, competition will be inherently less, right? With larger resources to throw at COD, the likelihood of a threat from an independent, such as 1047 Games, right, and a Splitgate is super unlikely, right? People aren't going to get into that pool, right? Why would you bother?
But
who's going?
Go ahead. Why do you think that's the case? And we had Worryword on the show. Was it last Sunday? I think, and he used the example of Microsoft and remember Netscape, and how Microsoft was able to, use its war chest at that time. And this is 20 something years ago, 23 years ago, maybe longer than that. What was that? 98, 24 years ago. He was drawing a little bit of the parallel of, this is kind of, for him, it reminded him of Microsoft coming into, with Internet Explorer and being able to use its adjacencies to kind of muscle the competition out. Where Windows was the dominant platform, and I think if I'm not mistaken, I don't think you could actually use Netscape at the time on Windows. Is that did I get that correctly?
You could use it. The problem was and this is where Microsoft got caught submitting false testimony. Microsoft tried to submit testimony that said it was incredibly easy to install. It installed like every other app. And then when the government actually got a hold and was able to run the tests independently, either that or some other video surfaced from like a whistleblower. Then it was shown that no, it didn't install. When you installed Netscape, the icon shortcut didn't pop onto your desktop.
Okay, that's what it was. Okay, yeah.
Like it normally did. You had to go digging through the file explorer to find it. Yada yada yada.
Okay, gotcha. Okay. So we're always trying to draw on that parallel, kind of like how them using an existing platform, Windows, and he tried to draw the parallel between Windows and Game Pass, and COD being Internet Explorer to Windows, and or did I get that wrong? Call of Duty being like, yeah, Internet Explorer to Windows. But he also mentioned that, you know, that it was a time where Microsoft was able, because of its resources and its dominance in the OS space. And he's drawing parallels with, again, Game Pass being the dominant subscription space in gaming and in OS. You know, he and I think X, that's kind of the point here. He's like, X was saying it didn't help that Netscape cost money, i.e. was free. Microsoft could do that. But he was kind of drawing those similar parallels. And, you know, I'm not saying that's exactly what's going to happen here. But I do think it's kind of interesting going back at history and kind of using Warrior's example from a couple shows ago, drawing that parallel. Because it made me think about, yeah, like Microsoft as a company. And this is where I do have some hesitation now. I know people have asked me, what are your thoughts, BRAP? Like, what are your real thoughts on this whole deal? Look, I do have some hesitation given Microsoft history, given that they could be a loss leader and they could just bleed money, and that could impact competition. And is that kind of where you're going to? Is that where you, Hamp, just so I get an understanding too, is that why you feel that maybe, yeah, this wouldn't promote more competition because they can do things that other companies who are more financially strapped and can't be loss leaders maybe not have the capital compete in that FPS space then?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't just state that. I mean, I quantifiably proved that, right? As I went through what I wrote today. And then Captain Plies in chat saying, please explain where all these other places are Microsoft will put COD. I'm not sure what drumbeat you missed, Captain Ply, but first of all, you know, Microsoft has made a deal to put COD on the Nintendo Switch, and on the Nintendo platform, and then obviously, you know, there's the high likelihood that COD will go either into Game Pass, or what I've suggested is that eventually what we'll see Xbox Cloud Gaming decoupled from Game Pass, so that you're not required to be a Game Pass Ultimate subscriber to use Xbox Cloud Gaming, which you don't now for free to play. So I mean, that means Warzone's going to go on to Xbox Cloud Gaming, and it's going to be available to people, you know, at no cost, you know, just like Fortnite is. So, you know, again, Captain Ply, you know, Microsoft has stated, right, that COD will be available to other people on more platforms, and that you won't be required to purchase an Xbox to play COD.
I'm sorry, Hamp, I'm typing. It's hard to like keep up with the chat, you know, try to engage with the chat.
Yeah, no, it's super busy. But you know, to your question is, you know, is it a real threat that Microsoft?
Yeah, because that's the thing. Is it a real threat, Hamp? I'm sorry, I don't mean to interrupt, but like, is it a real? Because some people are going to argue that, hey, it's not a threat. You know, we still, you know, COD still, because I've seen this, Call of Duty still, you know, shooters still have to contend with COD anyway, like on a yearly basis, like that. So, and we're still getting shooters. So I've seen people say that. But I guess the twist that you're adding is that, well, it's Microsoft owning is a little bit different than just Activision being the sole, you know, having sole ownership of Call of Duty. Because Microsoft can do things because of their war chest where they can just, you know, put the games that I forget what you said in the article. I think was it putting the games everywhere, and what was it? I'm going to pull up this article again, man. I'm sorry, Ham. Hold on just a second, man.
Yeah, no problem. And Captain Ply is saying it's already there except for the Switch. Again, I'm not sure what you're talking about, Captain Ply, but as far as I know, the last time I checked, Call of Duty is not in Game Pass, and therefore it's not on Xbox Cloud Gaming. And even if it were on Xbox Cloud Gaming, I mean, if it were on Game Pass, then yeah, you would be able to access Warzone without paying a fee. But as far as I know, but it's not. So, I mean, if you have a reference or a link to point me to where it says otherwise, just let me know.
Hold on a sec here. I'm trying to pull up this article where you bring up the hold on a sec here, man. All right, so you said so this is, I think this is okay. So here, Activision is not insulated against enduring multiple years of commercial slippage in its crown jewel, which you just mentioned. You said that COD will be more places. It will be available to people at a reduced cost. Cloud spend will no longer be a factor as part of cost of goods sold to Activision. The pressure will be less, and with a widespread market share and cheaper consumption models compared to Battlefield, competition will inherently be less. And that's the point that you're making. $70 versus $1 deal or $15 a month.
Right. again, if and again, we have other examples of this, right? So I talk about, right, and I pointed to this article, British Motor Corporation, right, which I didn't read as detailed about this as I should have, but when BMC was making the Mini Cooper, right, it's like and when they were originally making the Mini Cooper at a significantly reduced cost, right? Who was going to get into that low end vehicular market when you were up against a product as desirable, right, as the Mini Cooper when it was being sold at the price that it was, right? That's a barrier to entry to competition, right? That's an economic factor, which is taught in undergrad and graduate schools, right? And that businesses take into account. What we've seen even from the battle royale space over the last few years, right, is the battle royale space is only going to support, right, so many games, right, in that space. That could be viable going concerns. And then, below, I don't know, 3, 4, 5 competitors, maybe, you just get to a point where people aren't generating, there's not enough juice for the squeeze, right? And Jacob Tapua says, don't bring up Battlefield. I love this series, and EA has butchered the last two. And again, this is where I point back to what Lena Khan has said, right? And what I said, right? Just because something is a consumer problem doesn't mean it can be ignored and not considered as an anti-competitive factor, right? The point is that let's say they make the best Battlefield in the world next year, right? Again, if you can't climb over their barrier to entry because COD is peanut buttered around all the place at an incredibly low cost, and your alternative is to sell that game at $70, right, then that creates a competitive barrier to entry. And so when we talk about Xbox and participating in loss leader activities and strategies, because Microsoft can absorb that cost, right, that's one of the things that I went through in the post today as we look back at Generation 7, 8, and 9, right, which is where I get to the whole thing of, it's a bit of a reach for people to tell me that this acquisition is good for consumers when I think there's an argument that can be made that Xbox hasn't been great for consumers or the industry since the beginning of Generation 7. And so, Generation 7, Red Ring of Death. Reports started coming out about that just after launch, right, 2005. Microsoft didn't extend the warranty until 2007. The Xbox 360 Slim, right, which actually eradicated the Red Ring of Death essentially, didn't come out till 2010. That was 5 years. And during that time, right, Microsoft participated in what are arguably delaying tactics, right? It extended the warranty. It fought several legal cases and class action suits, individual lawsuits that came up during that time period, which they are able to do because they have a crack, highly paid legal team as well as outsourced legal assistants that other competitors couldn't necessarily keep up with from a financial perspective. And so if I look at console generation 7, despite all the great exclusives that came out, despite how fun the Xbox 360 was, you can't really build an argument for me that says the Red Ring of Death was good for gamers. That was a point where they got a 1-year head start. They sold at a lower price than the PlayStation 3, and they gained a foothold in market share. So much so that, again, there's an argument that it indoctrinated its customer base to accepting the shoddy workmanship of the Xbox 360 for several years until it solved the problem. And I mentioned just anecdotally, right? I paid for an Xbox 360, an Xbox 360 Jasper, right, which was an incremental upgrade where they made adjustments to the CPU and the cooling solution, and then I bought an Xbox 360 Elite, right, and all three got the Red Ring of Death. Generation 8. Prior to launch, Microsoft established a voice track of next-generation evolutions for the console and industry, and some for Xbox that all benefited the manufacturer and the platform holder, but were all bad for consumers. Persistent internet connection, prevention of playing used games, forced purchase of the Kinect, $100 more than the PlayStation 4, TV living room first design features. On top of that, they changed Xbox leadership hands 3 times in a span of about 10 months. And on top of that, they had the Microsoft equality clause, sometimes referred to as the parity clause for indie developers, right? This is a particular nugget that people who are Xbox fans tend to forget. If you remember, at the end of the 360 era, there were lots of indie developers which were disenfranchised from trying to get onto Xbox because there were a lot of strict guidelines. I have to talk about a lot of standards, personally, things that I think at least during that time, made the Xbox a higher quality platform and a more conformant platform. When I went to the Xbox, right, and it still persists to this day, I know what I'm going to get, right? You don't have these wild variances of voice solutions, for instance, like you still have persisting on the PlayStation today, right? But that soured a lot of indie developers who, again, don't have the cost basis, don't have the staff to get over those things. When Microsoft started the id at Xbox program, they had an equality clause for indie developers that said, if you are going to bring your indie game to Xbox One, it has to launch on Xbox and PlayStation within the same window. It cannot be a game that you have put on another platform as a priority. And for those instances, right, they had to specially review it. And so the knock-on effect of that was the year after the Xbox One launched, there were 66 indie games under development for Gen 8 consoles. Mm-hmm. Only 19 of those were planning and targeting the Xbox One. So again, what I ask is, tell me how a DRM scheme via the always on internet connection that is still negatively impacting gamers to this day, as we saw during the network outage of this spring, the higher price, muddled leadership, antagonizing independent developers, all that latter one yielded fewer indie games on the platform at a time when you were investing less in the development of exclusives. Explain to me how that was good for gamers. So again, that's Generation 9 or Generation 8. And then that brings us up to Generation 9, right? Which is a lot of consolidation, a lot of acquisitions. Again, taking the total number of suppliers off the table and consolidating them around Xbox, providing Xbox All Access, which, again, depending on what perspective you look at that, right, that is a debt-coupled means of consuming Xbox, which, again, makes a lower cost of entry for consumers, but just like the cell phone carriers used to do for cell phones, right, by subsidizing essentially that cost, right, that interest cost over time, creates an incentive to get consumers in, which is all about grabbing market share. Coupling that with a subscription service, which overall has led to a less incentivized business model to produce AAA critically acclaimed content. Again, explain to me how that's good for gamers. I don't necessarily know that all follows suit. Across 3 generations, I think there's definitely, a number of things which you kind of collate together, which says, I don't know that those things were great for gamers. And so I don't know how you then build an argument that says, let the people who have done these things across 3 console generations now acquire Activision, Blizzard, King, Call of Duty, and trust them that they are going to take that and convert that into something that's good for gamers. I think that's a difficult argument, I think, to make given the past history.
Yeah, I was going to say that. I've never been one to say that Microsoft acquiring Activision is a slam dunk for Activision, that it's going to lead to better games, better workplace environment. That's what I hear from a lot of people as well, given their track record. I mean, look, I can only judge people or companies based on their track record. They haven't had the greatest track record in even the 360 generation. There were issues. There's a big issue. I mean, with the Red Ring of Death, and that was their quote unquote best generation. So there's no reason for me to believe that Activision is going to, make better games, or we're going to get a better Call of Duty. I've seen people say that, we're going to get a better Call of Duty now. Okay. I haven't. I'm not there. I won't say that. I'm not going to come out and say that's a definitive thing that's going to happen just based on Microsoft's record of managing their production pipeline, or what I've seen over the last 20 years. I mean, that's not to say they haven't any good games. They have. I mean, we can all remember Halo and Gears of War, but yeah, it's just, look, it's an. And this, for me, this goes back to, again, how is this good for consumers? And the one thing I keep going back to is, as much as Microsoft's been saying, as they should, that it's great for consumers, it's good for the industry. I think I think it's fair, and I think many of us should be asking the question, how? And one of the things that I keep seeing is the bullet points. It's good for the industry. It's good for gamers. And when I've asked that question, how, no one's been able to really articulate the how.
Not only has no one been able to articulate it, Brap, but you get attacked when you ask that question.
Yeah, I got attacked.
Right.
I got somebody's like, oh, you're being negative. When I said I wonder how this benefits general consumers. Wondering that's not. I'm not making any kind of definitive like commentary on whether this deal is good for consumers or not. I'm asking a question, wondering. I want to know how. No one's been able to articulate that. The only thing that I see is good is if, again, people are in Game Pass in the ecosystem and they want Call of Duty, they want to consume Call of Duty in that model, and that requires you being part of Xbox. That requires you giving Xbox more money to get into a subscription service. But I also understand that not everyone sees value in Game Pass. So those people who are paying $70 may not see the value in subscribing for $120 or $180 a year for a subscription service for just one game. So I don't see the benefit across the board for many consumers. It seems like the benefits to a specific addressable market in Game Pass. And X Abbott says BRAP was supposedly would also get to PlayStation Plus. Well, what does that mean? PlayStation Plus day and date? But again, even with PlayStation Plus, that's not the entire addressable market of PlayStation. It's a small piece of their business, a small people that interact with PlayStation Plus. Not everyone, again, sees value in subscription services. So I think if people are, I think if we're looking at this like who this really benefits, I think it's just going to benefit those people who want that subscription service, want Call of Duty in a subscription service, but I don't see it benefiting people who don't see value in subscription service and they're okay buying the 1 or 2 games a year, and COD being one of them.
Right, and Jubei Sensei, again, it says having a choice is not a bad thing. People that still want to spend $70 can still do that. And again, this is where, people make arguments that serve their case, right? Not necessarily arguments that are truthful. Again, consumers having choice is not simply limited to their different methods to procure it. It includes the total number of suppliers on the market. And again, this acquisition reduces the total number of suppliers on the market. That is removal of choice from consumers. Now, maybe you can evaluate that as a net, right? And evaluate it, the negative, against the positive. But it's not, again, it's like BRAP said, it's not a slam dunk that just because it's going to be more places. Again, what I go back to is, I'm not convinced that, again, peanut buttering COD and making it available in more places is a good thing. Because, again, you're saying having a choice is not a bad thing. That is a way in which it is actually a bad thing, right? In terms of anti-competitive theory. It takes a product, it makes it available for cheap, it widely distributes it when owned by a corporation that can engage in loss leader activities, which other companies cannot, right? Activision has not done that yet because they can't, right? So you're going to peanut butter it, spreader it. That is going to make a barrier to entry for other competitors, right? And that's been one of my big points, right, in this vector of it's good for consumers. In order for me to understand that it is, or to believe that it's good for consumers, you have to answer the competitive part of the formula that says having more competitors in the market in the long term is positive for consumers. Having less suppliers in the market in the long term is worse for consumers. And I don't understand, I can't find any line of logic and reasoning that establishes for me that this will yield more competitors in the market. Every logic path that I go down tells me that it's going to be less. And so given that, I can't arrive at a net assumption and a slam dunk that this is good for consumers, right? Because people haven't been able to answer that question. And in fact, as I mentioned, right, when you even bring up that there are questions to be asked, you get attacked and shouted down. Which is, again, kind of the first indicator of the intellectually weak, in my personal opinion, because they can't put together an argument, sufficient to get them out of a paper bag.
Could have put yourself out of a paper bag, right? Is that the saying? Look, but that goes back to kind of the comments that I saw to Lena Khan, and people regurgitating the bullet points that Microsoft has given them. And look, if you want this deal to go through, that's whatever, it's fine. People have asked me, I don't care if this deal goes through or not. I'm going to be okay as a consumer whether or not this deal goes through. Like my gaming habits aren't going to change. Like, yeah, would I like COD to be in Game Pass? Save me $70 on a game that I do buy every other year? Sure. It actually would maybe increase my Game Pass usage, which I'm not really using it. And hopefully Microsoft, and hopefully with COD coming on board, Microsoft, they start, cranking out more of those first-party titles, which is one of the reasons why I subscribe to Game Pass. I was thinking, wow, this is a great value if they release AAA games 3 or 4 times a year. Yeah, sign me up. But they haven't done that. You bring up an interesting point, like how have you thought about this, Hamp, how this path kind of leads out to less competition? My biggest concern is if this deal goes through, I feel like this massive consolidation of the industry. And I have concerns of large corporations holding all the chips. Because if Activision can get $70 billion as a publisher, are we opening a Pandora's box here, Hamp? Because if I'm EA, I'm thinking, hey guys, Activision just got $70 billion, and we have Madden, we have these other popular IPs. We're the top 3. We're one of the top 3 publishers. Let's see what we can get. And so, like this, I don't think people ask that question. Like, what does consolidation mean to the industry? And consolidate, and as I'm seeing it, and my concern is if Microsoft gets the green light to acquire Activision, to ABK, then also who's next on Microsoft's radar? Because now they know, hey, you know what? We spent $70 billion. We got the deal done. We have this unlimited war chest that we can get. We know Satya's going to approve it, and maybe he won't. Maybe Satya won't. But I'm saying, but he has. The point is that the precedent has been set. What does that mean for the industry? Who else does Microsoft start acquiring? Do we get into this to an arms race? Like that's the part. And when you think about consolidation in the industry, that ultimately leads to less choice. I don't see how that's good. That's the one concern that I have about this deal. Like, obviously, I don't. At the end of the day, as a consumer, like I don't care as much like how I'm buying COD, but I do care more about what precedent does this set if this deal goes through, and do we see this mass consolidation? If we do get mass consolidation, that's less choice for consumers. I don't think that's good.
Well, right. And I wrote about that a little bit today. Just a couple things in the chat, which is hard to keep up with. Now there's a super chat coming in too. Now, crap. I can't find it. Oh, if the baby hand, if the Activision deal is bad and takes away competition, then so does any acquisition. That means Sony is also at fault. Don't disagree, baby hand. But again, one of the things the regulatory commission has to look at, and one of the things the judge will have to look at, is impact and scale. Sony buying Bungie obviously does not have the same scale of impact that Microsoft acquiring Activision does. Bungie is not one of the top 10 companies in the industry that make 65% of the revenue. Activision is. And so that will create a different set of optics on this. And I forget, there were a couple other things there that I can't even get to. So Ryan talked about, can you comment on Xbox's current management running those studios on top of all the others? We'll try and get to that, Ryan. We'll come back to it. But yeah, that's a concern. Again, what has been the output of the 22, 23, 24 studios that Microsoft already has, and how does adding 15 add to that. That's more of an Xbox strategy discussion. Jubei says, I don't have anything against Lena, but the FTC hasn't won a case that mattered in how long. I just don't like elected officials wasting our money for their own political gain. Lena should have, I guess,
she's not. First of all, she's not an elected official.
Right.
I've seen people say wasting taxpayers' money. Like they get a budget. She's working within the confines of that budget that they get. So it's not additional taxpayer money that's going into this. But go ahead.
Yeah, and by the way, maybe you can expand on that a little bit for me, Jubei. Just so people are clear, I guess I have to say this because I don't know that everybody's clear. Taxpayers have already paid the money for that staff's salaries, right? That's already a done deal. Regardless of what they're working in, they're already part of the national budget. And I don't know how many cases they've won in court, but obviously several mergers have been blocked, right? Whether by taking it to court or simply, right?
You mentioned one earlier, the NVIDIA ARM deal was one.
Right, and you've got Facebook now for Meta for its attempt to acquire a VR company, et cetera. So, and we can talk about political gain. You can call it sidestepping or whatever. But look, when it comes to matters of government, I guess everything is political, right? The job of the FTC is to enforce the laws of the nation. Laws are always interpreted, right? Laws are interpreted, and that can change based on administration. That can change based on who's rendering the opinion. We have a system in this country that allows people to argue that and for laws to be subject to different types of interpretation. That's what our legal system provides for. Our judicial and executive, our executive branch has determined that there's a problem, as I mentioned a couple episodes ago, with the size of mergers that have happened in this country over the last 3 decades. And what is absolutely irrefutable, right? I'm not even going to have an argument about it, is that you can look at the mergers of the 90s, 2000s, 2010s, and there is no way that you can build an argument that those mergers were good for consumers. There's no way that you can look at the cell phone company mergers that happen, the entertainment corporation mergers that happen, and say that, again, that there's an argument out there that people are happy with their cable bill and people are happy with their cell phone bill. And again, all of those companies had to be taken to court for class action lawsuits in the aftermath of those mergers being approved, right, to get their behavior under control, right? So again, when those mergers were approved at 132, at 182 billion, right, there is a regulatory precedent, right, that's been set, a regulatory question that's being asked that says, did we not do enough? Did we not do enough? Did we not put the brakes on Facebook acquiring WhatsApp and Instagram, right? Did we allow too much consolidation of power and influence under Meta? And is that what led to Cambridge Analytica? Those are questions that are being asked. We can call those political, but at the end of the day, they're questions about whether or not things are being done appropriately in this country, and if the government has taken the actions that it should have done to protect consumers. And so in my mind, the fact that they're asking, should we be putting the brakes on something? That's absolutely what their mandate is. That's absolutely what we've charged them to do. That is the job of the FTC. So, I mean, I don't know what the hell else those staffers are supposed to be doing for the amount of money that they get paid, right? To be GS13s, GS12s, GS11s, whatever. It seems like that's exactly what their job is.
Exactly what their job is. I mean, the issue that people are taking is that it's because it's Activision Microsoft, and they are rooting for this deal to go through, and they're not understanding that, look, whether you agree with Lena Khan's reasoning, she's still acting within the framework of the FTC, and this is what they do. I think in this case, people just don't like that they're doing it, or that they're doing this with the Microsoft Activision deal. Right. Because when they were making this argument with the NVIDIA ARM deal, you didn't see people up in arms. You didn't see people saying, right, "Oh, this is political. They're wasting taxpayers' money."
you don't see people flipping out that Meta is being opposed for buying a VR person, right? A VR company, right?
Yeah, VR company. I don't see that, as people like to say, the same energy. I don't see that energy. So it's for me, it's like, no, it's probably more political for you. Because of your own bias of Microsoft, Xbox, and acquiring this, Activision. I mean, but this is what they do. This is how the FTC operates. I don't think they're doing anything that's maybe outside the bounds. The one thing that I'll say that it is interesting, though, they are, because this has been discussed in quite a bit about vertical mergers, acquisitions have never really been scrutinized as much. But there's the FTC saying, well, wait a minute, guys, like, yeah, we've allowed those deals to happen, but we don't think that those deals actually necessarily benefit the consumers either.
Right. So to get back to your question too about, right, why and how could this lead to fewer suppliers on the market, right? Which again is inherently bad for consumers. The argument, part of the argument that I argued today was, should this merger acquisition go through, other third-party publishers will have additional financial and competitive incentive to do the same, right? They're going to seek out other competitors to merge with or seek selling themselves to one of the big five. They're not going to watch this consolidation happen and see a 600-pound gorilla become an 800-pound gorilla and go, oh, well, I guess I'll just keep doing business the same way I always have. Right? That's not what corporations do, right? When we see an 800-pound gorilla enter the room, we start moving. We start figuring things the frick out, right? And
that's kind of my point. Does this trigger a arms race? I mean, you mentioned the Soviet Union earlier. It's like, because look, I mean, some of the live chat said, how come, let me get the super chat real quick before I forget it. Because I think it goes into what I was just about to say. Rudy Days, 93 to $10 super chat. Thank you, Rudy Days. Says, so if competition is a concern, why isn't others besides Sony being outspoken to this deal? Are the likes of EA wanting to be acquired? Then does that bot open the door for others, or then does that open the door for others like Tencent, Apple, etc., etc.? And that's kind of been my concern too. Is like, look, EA may not voice against this deal because they may say to themselves, hey, you know what? Holy shit, we have Madden, we have valuable IP. We're up there with the Activisions of the world in terms of top publishers globally. If this deal can go through, we know there's a precedent set. Let's put some feelers out. Let's see if we can cash out. Let's see if we can get a big payout the way Activision did.
Yep. Let's start putting out feelers to Amazon, Apple,
Tencent. Yeah.
Tencent, Embracer, right? Embracer buying EA may not look like the to do, right? But the thing that might be interesting is, an EA Embracer merger, right? Where their corporate structures, right, meld. And so the line of argument that I said today was, look at the video entertainment industry. I almost hate to do this, but I was constructing an argument. So I don't feel bad about using other things that other people lean on, right? Netflix disrupted the legacy cable television model, and then we had a flurry of M&As, right, to compete with that model. Disney moved to buy key properties. Warner Brothers merged with Discovery. NBC Universal, which got its merger approved, right, and all this, it's going to be good for consumers, right? They're going to have more choice. They're going to have more suppliers. Bull. What did NBC Universal do? They turned around and they bought Sky, right? Again, fewer suppliers and competitors on the market. All of these moves have resulted in one thing that is undeniable. More and more content keeps now getting moved behind paywalls. There's zero argument that those mergers, those M&As have been good for consumers. The problem when similar behavior starts gaining momentum in the gaming industry, which it will if this merger goes through, is that there is no Fubo, TiVo, Roku, and Vizio to create a disruptive middle tier, right? In fact, everything the industry is showing us is that mass consolidation around the strongest financial players could result in, this is the entertainment industry, right? Could result in Netflix itself being acquired by, you guessed it, one of the big tech five. And specifically, Microsoft has been rumored to be in consideration for purchasing Netflix. And that's not from the fan speculation that I see running amok out there. That's from the fact that Microsoft was the chosen vendor selected by Netflix for its advertising scheme, right? Which, what did we mention earlier in the podcast? They've they're working on or have submitted a patent for, which, what did we mention earlier in the podcast? Hinges on online gaming, streaming content, part of that patent, part of their monetization path. And so my whole point in this is that there are concerns that consumers have that are valid concerns, right? Concerns that consumers and agencies have that are valid concerns, all of which are warranted to pick through. The problem I have principally in the conversation that's going on in the gaming community, and BRAP's mentioned it before, is that when people are supportive of Microsoft, it's not, well, I think it would be good, right? There's no humility, right? There's no room for a gap of consideration, right? It's an, as we always say, it's an absolutely, I'm right, I'm calling it now. Anybody else who's saying anything different is cap, right? It's all of these dumb Urban Dictionary terms that we use, right, to try and snuff out and quell conversation. And this is one of the things that we see. I mentioned earlier how when BRAP raises this question, he gets attacked, right? One of the common tactics that's followed by people who engage in this cult sociopathic activity is they attempt to quiet any effort to put more information out into the atmosphere, right? We absolutely don't want more information put out. We absolutely don't want historical precedent being brought up. We absolutely don't want all these facts being assembled and put together so that you have a holistic picture of what Microsoft's performance envelope has been across 3 console generations, which is why I put this stuff on my blog instead of putting it on Twitter, right? All we want to do is we want to make an assertion, make a proclamation, and then shut down any conversation to the contrary. And that should be an indicator for people who are buying into that maybe those people aren't as secure in the factual basis of their assertions in the first place. But again, to go back to my point is there's lots of lines of reasoning that say this is potentially going to result in more mass consolidation. Even before this started, I'd put a theory out beforehand that said, the industry is heading towards mass consolidation, right? What we're going to see, and it's going to proceed over this generation, is production costs are increasing and the demand from gamers is increasing such that the only people who are going to be able to bear this cost are the platform holders. And what you're going to see is a consolidation of things around the platform holders, and so around Xbox and around Sony, which is exactly what we're seeing now. And if this deal goes through, as I just mentioned, right, EA is going to be put in a larger threat envelope. Ubisoft is going to be put in a larger threat envelope, and they're not going to. And Ubisoft has already been making maneuvers, right, to have itself acquired, and to do it in a way that protects them from some of the risks that they were exposed to when Vivendi Universal was out hunting for them, and in a way to secure and keep the I forget how to pronounce their name. Who are the brothers that own the holding company that owns Ubisoft?
I forget the brothers. Yeah, I know. Yeah.
Yeah, but they're going to make sure that their liabilities are protected, which is why they brought Tencent in, right? And companies that slip and slide, in their financial footing are going to get targeted by Tencent, are going to get targeted by NetEase, are going to get targeted by Embracer. And so, right, we're just going to go down the path of where, this mass consolidation occurs. And like we've said, the end result is things are not going to be better for consumers.
Well, that's what I'm saying, like a mass consolidation. And we're seeing consolidation now. I mean, we're seeing that. But a consolidation at this point, at this level, we haven't seen that. That's, again, like, and I asked asked everyone the question. I said, what if we open Pandora's box here? And he's like, well, that's up to the regulatory bodies to decide. I'm like, exactly. That's what they're considering too. Like this deal, and if people aren't thinking about this deal could have far more ramifications beyond, oh, Call of Duty is going to be everywhere. It's great for consumers. No. As I mentioned earlier, if you don't think that EA and Ubisoft, and we know Ubisoft's making moves, if you don't think that they're going to start poking the bear and seeing who's out there, who's out there, who could acquire them for 60, 75 billion, But then the other question, does Microsoft, now they know they can make $70 billion acquisitions. If they go after another large publisher, what's to stop them? Do we want that? Do we want to see an arms race, a consolidation of the industry where it potentially leads to less choice for consumers? I'm not sure. I'm not okay with that. I don't want to see that.
Right. And Falky, we apologize. We didn't mean to throw you in the same pool as everyone else. I know that you've been putting a lot of thought behind this. And as one of those who's interested in seeing Microsoft use their money differently, is someone who's brought up those arguments.
Yeah, Falky's been saying it, like Microsoft should take that $70 billion and invest in like in their profitable, their more profitable sides of their business, like Azure. I know he's been saying that for a while.
Yeah, and I honestly don't think. I mean, after this, if Microsoft gets this deal to go through, I personally don't believe that they'll go after another big. I think that they'll go for anything that's in between, right? Any strata of tier between Bethesda and Activision, but I don't expect them to go after another one of the big tentpole third-party publishers. But I do absolutely think that those big tentpole third-party publishers will be ripe for acquisition by Sony, by Google, by Amazon, by Apple, or NBC Universal, or Warner Brothers, right? That again, like you said, right? If the temperature gets set that those things are permissible in today's regulatory environment, then they're absolutely things that people are going to start looking at.
Yeah, no, and you don't have. I just pose a question of, what if Microsoft buys another publisher? I do agree. I don't think it's likely they would, because I think that would, if the deal went through, they were, we're going to buy EA now. I think that would raise a lot of eyes, and that might bring some additional heat to them they may not want. You know what I mean? But then again, it's like how many more publishers are they going to buy? If not the size of Activision, let's say they acquire Activision. Now they have Bethesda. Who else do they buy? That's concerning to me. And I just base that off Microsoft's history, but also going back to the point of an overly consolidated market would lead to less choice for consumers. And I think, one of the things, Hamp, that stood out to me in your article, I love that. Let me also kick the legs out from underneath the table of the regulators need to protect consumers, not competitors. That's bullshit. That was great, by the way. When you said it's much easier to defend a protect consumers line of argument because it's the argumentative distance from supplier to consumer, anti-competition lines of questioning become diluted. But even that in that obfuscation, a great legal tactic and great for console warriors too. That's funny. That actually made me laugh. That's a great point because you're seeing that play out. It does not, and this is the part that really kind of stood out to me. You wrote in the blog today. It does not upend the economic truth in a capitalist competitive market that the presence of more competitors eventually makes a better overall situation for consumers. Microsoft acquiring Activision is not expanding consumer choice. It is a reduction and consolidation of the total number of competitors in the upper echelon of revenue-generating gaming industry players. It makes fewer gaming companies, not more. So, Hamp, that really stood out to me, and that's you
got to read the Bazinga.
Oh.
That simple math should be readily apparent even to the most STEM challenged of the Twitter populace.
My God. That was a way a great way to cap off that paragraph there. But no, I mean, but that got me thinking about when I read that. I was like, wait a minute, like consolidation. What does consolidation mean? It means less people, less companies out there operating independently, which means less choice. And again, it goes back to my question of how is this good for the industry? If this is a consolidation of taking away more from the industry and having one company hold a lot of those big publishers or developers under one house, how does that lead to more competition? How does that benefit the industry? I mean, I consolidation is never in my 45 years of life. Anytime when I see mass consolidation, I can't necessarily say to myself, "Oh, it's been great for consumers."
Right.
When I think of cable, I think of the cell phone industry. I think of energy, gas. I mean, God. I mean, how did ExxonMobil happen? That's what I want to know.
Right. I mean, it's when you look back at the history of M&As, like it's absolutely flabbergasting, right? That some things were allowed to go through. So Falky mentions, I asked earlier, what if Sony or someone else got EA and Take-Two? They'd have all the major sports games. Absolutely should be blinding obvious, and right, and that's the thing that we've commented on, Falky. We absolutely agree. Again, if the temperature gets set that this is permissible in today's regulatory environment, then again it would make no sense, right? If you were an EA, Take-Two again. I'm currently on my Strauss Zelnick hype, so I believe Strauss has maneuvered Take-Two to the point where they are in good financial health, and wouldn't be looking necessarily for Yeah, go ahead.
Like the $1 Million Man says, everyone has a price.
True.
I don't.
Well, I mean, I've made the argument that Microsoft should go after Strauss. That would be a way to do it, right? Acquihire, right? Buy Take-Two, bring Strauss in, make him the heir to Phil, at least for a short period of time. Get him a protege, train that person up for 2 or 3 years. Let Strauss take off with a big golden parachute since he's nearing retirement age, and then leave that protege in place who knows how to do disciplined financial regimen, and hold people accountable in a production pipeline.
Yeah, by the way, I did see someone in the live chat say, said if Sony buys ABK, then it would be okay. No, actually, I don't agree with that. I wouldn't even be okay with Sony buying ABK for the reasons I mentioned in terms of consolidation. Like, I don't want to see Sony, Nintendo buy big publishers like, ABK or Take-Two. I don't want to see that in the industry.
I mean, Hectic World. I mean, I just have to assume that some console war and bullshit. Look, I'm not going to sit here and make a set of arguments that would apply consistently to a different vendor or manufacturer, right? And then take them off the table because the name changes on the branding. That's not what we do on this show, and that's definitely not what I do.
Yeah, and he says if a company wants to sell them, let them. I mean, look. The point is that it's not. We talked about this a couple weeks ago. We understand that companies should be allowed to buy other organizations. Like I don't think we've said that shouldn't happen. But this conversation is a little more nuanced than if companies want to sell, let them, because there's ramifications. We talked about because we gave people keep bringing up. Well, Sony buys publishers. They just bought Bungie. Well, the impact, the economies of scales are different here for those kind of acquisitions. And so, while I don't necessarily disagree that a company should, if a company wants to sell, they should be allowed to be acquired, but it can't be a free for all. Because there's ramification and impact to that.
Right. So he says you can't see the future. That's the point, Hectic World. And because I can't see the future, I'm not willing to necessarily just buy the way that Microsoft says this is going to go after their acquisition, except that at face value that they're going to hold themselves faithful to what they say to us now. You can choose to. That's your perspective and your opinion. You're absolutely right. We can't see the future. But as I mentioned, right, the job, the mandate of the regulatory agencies is to absolutely take the future into account, to absolutely not consider what does this do for the next 2 years, what does it do for the next 5 to 10 years to the industry.
Well, I would disagree with one aspect of we can't see the future. We can't see the future as it relates to Microsoft acquiring ABK. Well, let me take. We can look at other industries where there's been mass consolidation, and I think we can draw a line and say in those industries where there's mass consolidation, like the cable industry, like cell phones, those consolidations haven't been a benefit to consumers.
Absolutely,
this could trigger that consolidation in the gaming industry, and therefore I asked the question, and that's why I'm saying, hey, I don't want to see mass consolidation because we've seen other industries that have been impacted by these types of consolidations, and it really hasn't been a positive thing for consumers.
Yeah, and I would definitely stand on that. You can't see the future, but as I mentioned before, but the thing you cannot mathematically deny is that it results in lower suppliers on the market. Right? That can't be questioned, and that's not an argument I'm going to have.
Yeah. I'm just trying to keep up with the chat here. Yeah, I got to be honest with you, man. I'm really surprised that people aren't. You talk about like the mathematics here. I mean, it's not a difficult concept to understand. The more you take off the plate in terms of suppliers, the less people have to choose from. Like
Right.
the less choice you have as a consumer means that the actual suppliers have more power, and therefore can have greater dictate in terms of pricing,
Right.
or how you consume entertainment. You have less choice as a consumer.
Right. And
Like
I'm going to disagree with one thing Jubei says. He says there's too many indies and stuff for it to really be mass consolidation. Your budget or studio or publisher size does not correlate to success or failure. It absolutely does, Jubei. Right? I've just talked about before how there are, again, let's talk about some of the metrics, right? 10% of the companies and corporations in the gaming industry make 65% of the revenue. 90 I mean, the quoted number that's out there is 95%. I back off of that a little bit. I put it at, just, 90, 91, 92, 93%. Of games fail or get canceled. There's actually a hugely small percentage of the total games that are made. Again, consider the fact that 1,000 games typically get published to the Steam storefront every year, right? There is an incredibly small number of games that are actually successful, meaning that they make 15% margin, right, in the money that they recover, right, in terms of cost of goods sold. They make profit. Sorry. So and again, most of those games are your ones with super big budgets, and backed by like financially stable companies, which is why 65, right? Only 10 players make 65%. So and none of those companies that are in there are people who make big indies. Right? They're people who make big games, notable games that are well known. Maybe there's an exception to that rule that I'm casting aside, but yeah, the size of the operation absolutely does contribute to your stability, right, in the market, because you have the ability to absorb more risk.
X Abbott says explain Epic. Oh boy. I was actually waiting for someone.
What was that?
X Abbott says explain Epic.
I don't know what is he saying?
I think he's referring to, you were saying about the hold on a sec here. What was he? Maybe he's replying to someone else. X Abbott, is the Epic thing? Is that what are you referring to? What we just said? Is that a question mark? What we just said? Hector says ABK was going down the hill. That's why they want to sell. ABK still makes money. Hectic World. I mean, I'd argue that one of the reasons why they sold was because of Kotick being in hot water, and their stocks dropping because of the release of what was it? Call of Duty? Was it Vanguard?
Right. Yeah, and I mean, I guess look, maybe the question. Yeah.
Yeah, but look, I mean, but Hectic World. Look at Modern Warfare 2. They just set a record number. They just made $1 billion revenue in like 4 days. So yeah, I would argue that with Call of Duty that he's saying, okay, X Abbott's saying, I'm just saying Epic and the multitude of huge shiny developers show how dynamic the market is. You can go from small, mid to large in a short time.
You're gonna have to prove that out for me to say that. I mean, to show me or tell me a company that's in the top 10 that got into the top 10 in a small time, because I believe all of those are relatively entrenched. There might be one or two small foreign concerns that were kind of cobbled together out of a large amount of capital. And again, followed this kind of Xbox shortcut route to making a bunch of acquisitions, but they didn't get to that by creating games.
Yeah, Tencent's been around for 25 years as a business, if I'm not mistaken. I have to look this up.
Yeah, I mean they've been around a while, but I mean they came to prominence and they got into that top 10 by acquisitions.
Yeah, they got into Epic. So not everyone X Abbott. You're saying Epic and multitude of huge shiny developers show the dynamic of the market is. Like, I don't disagree that the market offers a variety of different types or different types of offers consumers different God, what's the word I'm looking for? Points of entry or types of games, free to play games. Yeah, you mentioned Craft and PUBG is for you, but how many PUBGs are out there? I mean, it's not like like there's PUBGs growing on the trees.
Yeah, and I don't know that Epic is a really great case study because Epic has Fortnite, right? But a large part of what Epic does is because they own Unreal.
The Unreal Engine, yeah.
And obviously, every game corporation is not out there with an engine that they are able to license and sell to the rest of the industry, and gain a cut of the revenue from any game that they sell, any game that those companies sell, utilizing its technology.
Yeah, I would look real quick, Camp. Well, I understand PUBG success story. I mean, I'd be very. Like I wouldn't use PUBG as an example of it can happen and it can happen. It's that comes across like it's easy to happen because PUBG did it. I mean, how many battle royale games have come out that have failed? That have failed.
Yeah, because this is
more than have succeeded. Ubisoft. Right. What was the Ubisoft one that came out?
Hyperscape.
Yeah, failed.
Yeah, and I don't know what Cursed is. That is not one that I would put in the battle royale market currently today supports PUBG, which is on a pretty solid decline. I don't know what the hell Super People is. I mean, Jacob, I don't know if you're pulling the right stuff out. So PUBG, Fortnite, Apex, and Warzone, right, are the four key battle royales that the industry really supports. And just remember that battle royale is maybe more dependent than any game genre on monthly active users, right? Concurrent users, because people go to where the players are, and so it's only gonna endure so much fragmentation of that player base. It's not gonna endure huge amounts, and that's why what we've seen shaken out. And remember when PUBG and Fortnite went big, the two E3s that followed those, there were, I want to say, about a dozen people who came on stage saying that they were doing a battle royale. And again, the end result of that, the shakeout of that industry, is that about four, right, have really survived and gone on to become a major earning concern.
Yeah, Super People has about about 3,000 people playing right now.
Yeah, it's not a big number.
Yeah, so I wouldn't put that. I would even put Super People up there with PUBG, Fortnite, Warzone. I mean, Fortnite gets what? What's Fortnite has insane numbers. Now I want to look this up. And so one article says Fortnite will see anywhere between 2.9 and 4 million concurrent players.
Yeah, and let's just also mention, right, in my personal opinion, right, now breaking a little bit from the business, right, I don't personally feel, or again, we go to these concerns of what impacts happen to the industry. I don't look at battle royales as being a good for the industry, for me as a consumer, because I don't like battle royales. I prefer multiplayer arena games, right? So Call of Duty, Halo Infinite. So what I've seen over the years is just like some people are bringing up now, right? What we've seen is, EA is putting its resources on Apex Legends. They're not putting their resources on the next Titanfall, right? Which is what I would prefer. So Ryan Landis brings up a thing for us to get back to his question. Can you comment on Xbox's current management running those studios on top of all the others? And I think now he's also mixing it with Xbox adding ABK developers to their management. So again, look, as a person who I think somebody phrased it really well, better than I have in articulating my position. I love Xbox. I can't stand the Xbox fandom. This deal I think has a lot of upside for Xbox and Xbox management. Um, Halo Infinite has its problems. I think the game's super fun to play. I think the mechanics are great, but it has its problems in generating content. I think bringing ABK into the Microsoft fold, I've mentioned, I think one of the things that's more important to Microsoft than even the revenue is the fact that Activision has figured out, and it's done it via a very Machiavellian program. I'm not saying that's necessarily good. It's figured out how to string together 8, 9, 10 studios, right, in this massive production pipeline that enables them to pump out a new Call of Duty, at least to this point, every year, right? And Call of Duty is a huge code base. It's something like 5 million lines of code, right? It includes a lot of legacy stuff, like it still has Quake code in it, right? But these guys utilize that code base, share models, share physics engines and things across each other. Again, kind of put this huge production pipeline together, which I would contend the only other organization that's really done that is Ubisoft. And I think Ubisoft was going down that path more deliberately so, even before COD was. I think that's part of the super special secret sauce that Microsoft needs, is figuring out, right, is taking that production pipeline as a blueprint and utilizing it across the rest of their studios. The other thing I've mentioned is, again, from an ROI perspective, which we talked about a little bit earlier, we're dumping tons of money into 343 Industries and Halo Infinite. I don't necessarily know that it's doing it. I don't think that there are robust numbers that would be shown on a PowerPoint slide for the amount that Halo Infinite is bringing in via microtransactions. I think that would be a pretty sad story. And so at that point, I would probably say, I don't know why I'm putting skin on that game. I think I'm going to take 343 Industries.
Hamp,
and
can I say something real quick, Hamp?
Yeah. Go ahead.
That Halo Infinite gunplay. Oh, it's so good, so good. I'm sorry.
It is. It is. I love playing it. Right.
Oh, I do too. It's good.
But I go back to, right, I mean, and I played it, I live streamed it several times over this weekend, right? But what I could see from the time that I was playing is it's losing its player base, right? And you and I were on a month or two ago, and we kept seeing the same people in matches.
Yeah, it was like a revenge match at times.
Right. And sometimes like those people where you were fighting against one match and they were on your team the next match, right? And then I see, in particular what I saw this weekend too is, and I've been seeing this since the winter holiday update, is you go into certain modes and it takes longer to matchmake, right? I've got crossplay enabled, right? So it's clearly losing its player base. And so that's part of the problem, right? As that player base draws down, it just hits a point where, playing those games aren't fun. Look, I loved playing, what was the game? It was by Greyhawk Games, Dreadnought, right? Because I like ships and I like big capital ship battles, right? But that player base got drawn down so low that there was no point in playing. So at any rate, my point is that if I get the Activision Blizzard deal to go through, I bring them in, I probably say 343, you are going to become either I'm really angry with the fact that they haven't been held accountable, and I do something punitive, like I make them a support studio for Call of Duty, or I let them preserve their honor and I say, you're going to be the fourth studio in the prime studio lineup. And so now I'm going to have Sledgehammer, Treyarch, Infinity Ward, and 343 Industries. In 343, I'm going to give you some time, but you're going to get ratcheted in as the fourth studio to allow us either to make, because they're starting to slip on their new COD version every year, which is why we're not getting one in 2023. I either put them in place to get back to being able to release one every year, or it gives us the ability to go to a four studio rotation. And I also put Halo on a shelf for a little while, right? Because we've talked about how we feel that maybe constantly ratcheting Master Chief into place when you maybe don't have the greatest creative minds behind it might be right an indicator that it's time for you to give that IP a rest. And then, after 343 Industries spend some time right in that pipeline and kind of learning the ropes and figuring some new things out, right? Then pull them back out and maybe let them go do Halo. Or I do something, even more innovative and unique, like I give Halo to a different studio. Maybe I hold, those mucks at what is that studio? What is the quadruple studio A studio called?
Oh, the initiative. Yeah.
Yeah. Maybe I hold those yokels feet to the fire and I say, you guys, drop what you're doing in this business with Crystal Dynamics, and you guys are going to be in charge of Halo, but I'm going to hold you accountable, right? And I've talked about the corporate governance and making that a monthly thing. Maybe with those guys, I make that every 2 weeks, right? Or every week, or maybe I do something more severe about the leadership and management of that freaking studio, But and the other thing is, or I move 343. I let them keep Halo, but again, I put them under Johanna Fairs, who seems to be able
Not
to hold
Joseph
the
Ferris.
reins. Yeah. What's that?
I said not Joseph Ferris. Yeah, because
not Joseph Ferris. Johanna Fairs, who is the general manager for Call of Duty and took that series over.
Yep. Yeah.
So Ryan, let me know if that answers your question. Sorry.
Yeah. I see people bringing up like games that in the Korean markets that look interesting, and I've heard people make that argument. Oh, well, these games overseas will fill that vacuum.
Yeah, Crossfire was one of those big Korean series that occupied a ton of space and had a huge following, and Microsoft tried to bring it over as Crossfire X. I don't think I need to describe what happened with that any further.
Yeah, and I'm not sure that those games in China or Korea that people talk about, those small, that will flourish in those publishers that are going to be like the EAs, or the Activisions of the world. I just don't see that happening.
We're a different market, and I don't say that as a matter of pride. I think there's some negative knocks on that. But look, I mean, in the U.S. market, I just don't think you're going to get a ton of user base outside the Nintendo user base envelope that gloms on to a lot of the content that's coming from those markets.
Yeah.
It would be interesting. I haven't looked at the metrics, but it would be. I know Genshin Impact is a big deal, but I don't know how much of that big deal is American players. So that would be interesting to take a look at.
Yeah. Big shout to Evanboard Saga, $2 super set. Says drop the ABK deal and buy Sega is what I say. Yeah, Evermore's been saying that a lot, quite a bit, by the way, and he is sincere in his words. He actually DM'd me that today. He's like, I'm just saying. Everborn, if that deal happens, I will have you on BRAP because I want to get your thoughts on that if that deal goes through. But thanks for that super chat, sir. Appreciate it.
And honestly, when I talk about like if they do get this deal to go through, right? And when I say I see Microsoft going after other publishers, but above Bethesda, anything between Bethesda and Activision size, Sega is one of those that could happen. I mean, they have a relationship, they have a long relationship, they have a pretty intimate relationship, in collaborating and working together. And remember, Sega is moving all of their development to cloud native. As part of their online services push, right? Because that makes things easier in the development pipeline when you talk about promoting code, right, from lower development environments. Removes friction, removes cost, automates testing, makes all those things easier. So it's I don't think it's outside the realm of question.
Yeah. All right, Hap. We're at the 3:00 hour, man. I meant this for the show to be an hour. And it went an extra hour, which is fine. Great discussion as always. But hey, let me just say something, man. I hope you keep blogging more, because I love the blogs. Very insightful, very well thought out. It's a nice breath of fresh air, man, compared to what I get on my news feed with gaming media. So
thanks. Hey, Daz Messi, I gotta come at you. Look, we're gonna have to institute a thing like you have to be in the podcast for 15 or 20 minutes before you ask your question or something like that. Look, why is this a discussion? Microsoft has more studios than ever. When I come in here and I'm listening to this planning of giving ABK Studios Microsoft, that's because you came in later in the podcast. If you had been here earlier, the vast majority of the discussion was that Microsoft shouldn't get ABK. So I apologize that you came in late, but hopefully you'll get a chance to go back to the rewind and go back and look at what we were talking about at the start of the podcast and understand we came back around to this alternative perspective here at the end because some people had asked some questions.
Yeah,
I don't disagree. They have a crap ton of studios that they need to figure out what to do with. They have 23. As I mentioned before, I don't know that buying 15 more fixes any of the problems.
By the way, OBJ to Don, the Wizards are terrible, and cloud gaming is the future. OBJ to Don. And OBJ to Don, go Commanders. Anyhow. All right. Look, thank you everyone for stopping by, hanging out this afternoon. Really appreciate the time as always. And look, I'm going to actually here. This is what I'm going to do. I'm going to drop a link to Hamp's blog here. Are you okay if I do that, Hamp? I just want to make sure.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Okay, all right.
Don't feel bad about going to it. Don't feel like you need to take a shower after it. None of my stuff is monetized. You can go there safe. I don't write what I write to. I don't know how you'd monetize a blog.
Yeah, but I dropped the link there. Rounding off Infinity. Great articles. Great. I call them articles, but great. Some great insight here, man. Really, I mean, I again, for me, it's a breath of fresh air. And I'm not just saying that because you're a panel member here, BRAP, but I sincerely mean it. Like even, I don't know if you saw some of the, what is it? God, I tell you, I need more coffee today.
Was that the Twitter comments?
Yes, yeah. Some of the complimentary comments on Twitter, people were saying that it was a good read, and so. Yeah, no, good stuff, man. I hope you continue blogging because what you're providing is, again, a nice breath of fresh air compared to what I see on Twitter and what I see from some media outlets, gaming media outlets.
Yeah, so. I'm definitely going to be in 2023 converting conservation of energy, the time and energy that I was putting into Twitter to talk to people who are already entrenched and unwilling to listen to different perspectives. I will be putting that into my blog. I'm pretty sure. Pretty sure that's what my professor wanted me to do when he accosted me when I was back in town and happened to see him about whether or not I was writing. So I don't think he meant for me to engage in entrenched conversations on Twitter. So
no,
hopefully I'll.
Yeah, no, and there's definitely. Yeah, I was gonna say, and you know, Twitter. There's only so much you can flesh out on Twitter. You know, like that's why I like the blog posts that you're doing are just much more, like I said. You know, a little more nuanced. It just more well thought out. Not that you know your stuff wasn't, but it's easier to read. It doesn't get lost in all the Twitter mess.
Right.
Yeah. I should try video essays like who?
Jeez.
Oh god. Look, Victor. I can't take that individual serious. That individual hasn't put together a well thought out post and ever, I think. Yeah.
I appreciate it. I don't know if video essays is overly complimentary to what that individual does, but you know.
Yeah,
look, I don't know, and I don't know if he's talking about to you specifically, Rob. I know for what I did or do, like I couldn't do that. I mean, first of all, this has been a burning thought for about 2 days. When I originally kind of thought about the idea, and I was up at 5 a.m. this morning typing it, and I didn't publish it till maybe a little bit after 9. So that probably won't even be my norm. But there's no way I would want to do a video after that. Plus, I got to work.
Yeah, no, I hear. Yeah, I'll keep doing the blogs, Hamp. I mean, it's just it's a different perspective. It's just a different take on topics compared to what we see on Twitter and gaming media. And I wish there was more people that were doing this type of work or blogging like this. Maybe they are, and I'm not aware of them. But I think that there's a lot of pom-pomming. That's why, you know, Victor, you know, for the guy you mentioned, I don't take seriously because he's a cheerleader. And, you know, probably has desires to, work for Microsoft. I can't take that individual serious. So yeah.
Yeah, but if either the FTC or Microsoft is interested in hiring me out as a consultant for a small stipend, I will definitely support either. Please let the bidding wars begin.
Yeah, Ryan says, Hamp, you should go. BRAP Hamp, you should do the corporate A, scared of corporate B drama videos. Yeah,
right. With the lemon faced YouTuber thumbnail to go alongside it.
Exactly. Yeah. Oh my goodness. Oh geez, I tell you, man. Social media has killed critical thinking. I'm convinced of it. Convinced.
Or like our man EJ calls it, anti-social media.
Yeah, it is anti-social media. I love that. All right, everyone. Thank you again for hanging out with us. Really appreciate. I'm not sure if there's gonna be a BRAP tomorrow night. I don't know. I'm off this whole week, so I don't know. Who knows? Maybe there will be. I don't know. We'll see. But thank you everyone again for catching us. Really appreciate it. Check out Hamp's blog. I did drop the link in the chat. Rounding off Infinity, and give me a follow on Twitter, BRAP_podcast. That way you're kept up with show times and things like that. So, all right, cool. Well, Hamp, thank you again. I appreciate your time as always, sir. Appreciate the conversation as well. I don't know if you want to let everyone know they can find you or on Twitter.
You probably don't have to follow me on Twitter. Probably the best place, if you do actually want to keep up with me, is that blog link. Because, like I said, if I have anything of that anybody might consider of value to add to the gaming conversation, it will be over there on the blog. It won't be on Twitter. If you do want to swing through and catch me on the Enough to Keep Going Weekly Games podcast, that is over on the E2KG Network podcasting channel on YouTube. We wrapped up the year with our 40 top news stories that characterized the year in the gaming industry, and as well as our Gaming Superlative Award. So 14 categories of, if you think back to kind of your high school yearbook, those types of categories that all four co-hosts gave our picks for and descriptions of them and why, as well as answered challenging questions when we were called to the mat for how could we possibly pick the thing that we picked. But it's we try to make it a slightly differentiated show from all the Game of the Year award shows that go on podcasts. So it's something different. You are welcome to swing by and check that out. We will be reconvening on, I think it's the 8th of January. So I guess that's the second Sunday in January with our regular coverage. So I will see you guys there.
All right, sounds good. Well, thank you again, everyone in the live chat. Please do me a favor, hit the like button and consider subscribing. And hit on that bell notification so you're alerted when we go live. If you enjoyed today's content, we again, if you're looking for a well thought out, podcast about video games minus the console war stuff, you come to the right place. So, on that note, everyone enjoy the rest of the week. Again, not sure if I'm going to do a BRAP tomorrow night at 9 p.m., but I'll let everyone know on Twitter if I decide to do one. So, all right, thank you everyone. Appreciate it. We'll catch you next time.